Hello and welcome to this week's video. Today we're going to be answering some couple of questions from one of my viewers, Mark, from Alberta in Canada. And so Peter's going to be answering these questions for him, and I hope you find it interesting. If you have any questions for us that you would like answered, please feel free to drop a comment and perhaps we can do a video on your questions.
Yes, well, I first encountered narrowboats back in something like 1982 when a friend of my then wife asked if we all wanted to join them, her and her two children and sister and brother-in-law, on a narrowboat that they were hiring to go around the Midlands for 2 weeks. So we could all fit. That was 4 children, 5 adults and a dog, and we picked up a boat near Derby, and we actually would have come right down this canal behind me, although I have no recollection of it because it was a long time ago, but it was great fun. And a few years later I hired a small boat from a company called Cape Boats and took just my 2 children for a week, and that was it for a long time. I thought about buying a boat to live on because I worked abroad several times, and while I was abroad and my place was rented out, I thought when I come back maybe I could live on a boat, but it was never practical at the time because you couldn't keep in touch with people. There was no means of getting post, email didn't really exist, and we didn't have mobile phones, so it never happened. And then eventually with Marianne, I suggested we went on a little cruise, and she was very keen to try it. So I went back to Cape Boats, and even though it was over 20 years since I'd been there, they gave me a returning customer discount, which saved us a bit of money. And we went on a trip which I think is fair to say Marianne enjoyed very much. So then I found myself, my job ended slightly unexpectedly. I was trying to work out what to do, and the idea of getting a boat came up, and so with Marianne's support to do things like getting mail for me and all of that, and now with internet available via mobile phone signals, the situation was completely different. So having made the decision 6 months later, 6 years ago, 6 years and 2 days ago now, I moved on to this boat, which at the time was called Slow Roamin', which is a pun, and it left the G off the end of roaming, and the slow was like in the slow berries, which certainly in England everybody immediately associates with sloe gin, although sloe berries make very nice preserves as well. But when the boat was repainted, well, 4 years ago now, 3.5 years, we thought that we might change the name, and we were quite like the idea of Media Luna, which was it literally means half moon in Spanish, but it's also a very common dance move in tango. So we thought that would be fun, and then I got worried that people might not know how to pronounce it. A YouTube vlogger had a boat called Ewart, the old Scottish boy's name, and they were always being asked why their boat was called Ewart. So I thought, yeah, Media is going to be media, and Luna's going to be Luna. So let's not do that. And actually Marianne's sister suggested, why not call it Bandonian? And I thought, yeah, what a great idea, who could get that wrong? So that was how we got the name. The boat painter put us in touch with a sign writer called Jon Leeson. And I'll say, on the first conversation I had with Jon, he did say at one point, remember, I'm a sign writer, I'm not an artist. But I would beg to differ. Jon was really, I mean, he drew lots of proposed sketches for what we could do. We discussed, my original idea was to have a bandonion just stretched out. But I think his idea was a lot nicer. And there's a metal plate on my bandonion which says that it was imported by the sole importers in Buenos Aires when it was made in the 1930s. That was Breyer, Hermanos, which is brothers. So Jon copied the script style from that plate and used it in the name bandonion. The bandonion also has mother of pearl inlay all around it, and he copied the pattern and painted it onto the side, even to the extent he's painted in the way that mother of pearl changes colour when the light hits it, so there's little pink bits and blue bits amongst the white. And taking some photographs I've provided, he's painted a picture of the end view of the bandonion with my hand on it. And really I feel that I bought a work of art, except I got two works of art because there's exactly the same picture on the other side. The only slight thing, Jon was very much willing to get it right, so when I looked at it after we picked it up, I suddenly realised that the formally was the wrong word. It was formally, as in a formal event. And I phoned him and I said, sorry Jon, but you know, people are going to comment on that. And he said, oh, this dyslexia can be a right bleep. He got in his car and drove down. He said, I actually looked it up in the dictionary, but the word that he used is a correct word. It's just not correct in this context. So he repainted it on the side of the canal. And then we pushed the boat across to the other side of the canal so he could reach the other side and fix that one as well. And so that's where we got this beautiful name panel. He also painted the serial number of the boat in very large numbers, and I wonder if that was because I happen to know the job he did immediately before this was painting a steam locomotive. So, but it's just the job because that's how the boat is tracked on the system. Yes, with the old boat, the paint was green, but it was pretty dull. But the back here was just plain green, and when you're walking up to the boat from behind, the whole deck was green as well. It just looked a bit dull. So when we had the repaint, we thought it would be nice to have something on the back doors. A lot of people have these sort of double, triple curve things, almost like a eastern doorway. But we discussed lots of ideas, copying the cat painting from the front onto the back, putting words on, sunbursts, and then eventually we thought, put some music on there. Music on narrowboats is quite common because a lot of them have names that refer to being slow, like andante and largo and adagio, and they put random music notes on. But we thought it'd be nice to have some actual music. So I started thinking about tango music we could put on, and I researched copyright laws. And in the end I got a bit doubtful because there's a lot of tango music written by South Americans, and the rule there seems to be copyright lasts 70 years after the death of the composer. And I thought, So there's a piece of modern music that I quite liked, what they call neo-tango. A lot of it has electronics in it, but that was just a bandonion and an acoustic guitar. So with a bit of research online, I got an email address for the composer, who's also the leader of a neo-tango group. And I emailed him. He replied straight away, and his opening words were, "What a strange idea." I said, well, not really. I explained about music on boats, and he gave permission. He sent me a copy of his original score from 2002 and said, use this, and just mention on social media, just give him a credit. So what we ended up with is the opening 7 or 8 bars, I must count it in a minute, of a tune called Victoriosa, written by Sverre, Indris, Joner. You can put this in the notes, can't you? It appeared on an album with the name of his group, Electocutango, so it's available on all the streaming platforms to listen to. And again, we had discussions with Jon Leeson. My idea of sketch I sent him was very simple, and he came back, as always, with improvements. And he said, how about if I place it on a scroll? And so he sent me, again, 3 designs. And that one I thought was lovely. And he did it. He had no idea about music, he was just copying the shapes. So on the first pass, he missed out these little horizontal lines here, the ledger lines. And I said, well, that kind of tells you what the note is. So he went back in and added them in. And yeah, there it is. I often wondered if we perhaps should have put the name of the music on there, but perhaps that's just getting too complicated. But every time I see it, I'm pleased we did it, and I think, yeah, I'm pleased we were introduced to Jon Leeson to do this, because he's just, I think, a real artist. So yeah, that's the music exactly, and you can play it straight off the back of the boat if you want, because it's completely accurate. Yeah. So for those of you who haven't seen it yet, this is what the boat is named after. This is my bandoneon, which is not an accordion. It's basically a giant concertina. Because in the 19th century, people started making Anglo concertinas a bit more capable, adding more notes, and eventually a man called Heinrich Band came up with this particular layout, and he gave it a name, the bandoneon, and that's where we got it from. So we've got 38 buttons on the left, going from up to and 33 buttons on the left, going down to, hang on, so tremendous range, which makes it lots of fun. And the challenge is that because of all the tinkering over the years, there's no logical layout to the buttons. So a normal C, middle C scale jumps about a bit, and it's all different if you're closing the bellows, and so on. So it's a bit of learning. Had I realised how steep the learning curve was, I'm not sure if I'd really have embarked on this, but I bought an old instrument. This is from the 1930s, and it's been beautifully looked after, on the basis that if I can't play it, then at least I've got a nice artifact. But anyway, the music that's on the back of the boat, it's a nice piece, but it's quite tricky to learn, and I've let it slip from my memory somewhat. So we'll see how we get on. For the technically minded or musically minded, this first part is in C minor, which means three of the notes in the scale are flattened. But it lets you do things that the bandoneon's very good at, which is controlling the sound. And that first note, we take the reed up until it's overblown for drama. and so on.